Harper Quinn woke to the sound of a distant siren, slicing through the thin walls of her Bronx studio apartment. A reminder that morning had come far too soon, and before she could fully open her eyes, the sharp, bitter smell of burnt coffee from the downstairs deli drifted up through the cracked window, and her stomach flipped so violently she barely managed to stumble to the tiny sink before she vomited, gripping the counter with trembling hands as cold metal pressed against her palms. Her breath came in shaky bursts, each inhale tight with panic, each exhale tasting like fear. And when she finally lifted her head to stare at her reflection in the scratched mirror, she hardly recognized the pale, wide-eyed girl staring back at her. She whispered "not again" under her breath, but the wave of nausea rolled through her a second time, forcing her to lean forward until the worst of it passed. The morning light crept across the cluttered floor, illuminating her wrinkled blouse from yesterday, the stack of overdue bills on the dresser, and the Navy ID badge of HaleCorp the tech and cybersecurity giant where she worked as a junior communications assistant, a job she had fought desperately to get and worked even harder to keep. Today was supposed to be important, maybe even career-defining, because she had a meeting scheduled with Damien Hale himself, the elusive billionaire CEO who rarely spoke to anyone outside the executive team, and the mere thought of his name sent a cold tremor down her spine for reasons she had tried and failed to forget. 6 weeks had passed since the MetTech Gala, the night she had been assigned backstage PR support, the night the servers crashed, alarms blared, and she found herself locked in a glass-walled server room with Damien Hale watching the man. The world called a ruthless visionary unravel for just one stolen moment, showing fear, pressure, and a kind of vulnerable humanity she had never imagined existed beneath his polished exterior. That moment had led to another and another, until the two of them were pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, his breath warm against her neck, his hands steady his touch, sending a shock through her that she had felt every day since, no matter how hard she tried to bury the memory. The next morning she had fled before he woke, telling herself it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a night she would erase with enough work and routine. But her body refused to forget. As she rinsed her mouth, another wave of dizziness washed through her. Heavier this time, more insistent. Panic clawed its way up her throat. As she grabbed her coat from the back of the chair, shoved her feet into sneakers, and rushed down the stairwell to the corner bodega, she avoided the cashier's eyes, her heart pounding too loudly to hear anything except the thud of her own fear as she bought the pregnancy test, with shaking hands praying silently that she was wrong. Back in her apartment, she locked the door, slid down to the floor, and tore open the box, the plastic crinkling like thunder in the quiet room. She followed the instructions, each second of waiting, stretching painfully a countdown she was not ready for. And when the faint second line appeared, she felt something inside her collapse, as if the ground beneath her had shifted into a reality she was not prepared to face. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This cannot be happening." But it was, and the truth pulsed in her hands, undeniable and terrifying. She sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping the test so tightly her knuckles ached as her thoughts spiraled into panic. She imagined Damien's cold, unreadable eyes. She pictured him, dismissing her, accusing her, controlling the narrative in that calm, ruthless way he handled crises. Men like him did not fall into scandal. Men like him rose above it, and women like her were left in the debris. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, forcing her breathing to steady. Forcing herself to stand, to move, to pretend she still had a chance of surviving this day. She changed into a clean blouse, tied her hair back, and tried to wash the red from her eyes. But before she could finish buttoning her shirt, the apartment door slammed open, and her roommate Lily burst in breathless and wide-eyed. "Harper," she gasped, grabbing the doorframe for balance. "Your boss is downstairs." Harper blinked, stunned. What Lily pointed frantically toward the window. A black SUV, the expensive kind. "And Damien Hale just stepped out of it. He is looking for you." Harper's heart lurched so hard she thought she might faint. She moved toward the window in slow, disbelieving steps, her fingers going numb as she pulled the curtain back. The street below, usually chaotic with morning delivery trucks and commuters, seemed to pause around the sleek black SUV parked in front of her building. The back door opened with deliberate calm, and Damien Hale emerged, tall, impossibly composed, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that contrasted sharply with the dilapidated Bronx block around him. His presence alone seemed to silence the street. Harper felt her breath catch in her throat as he lifted his gaze, scanning the building with an intensity that made her chest tighten. His eyes found her window, locking onto her as though he already knew exactly where she stood. She froze the pregnancy test still clutched in her trembling hand, her pulse thundering in her ears as the unbearable truth settled over her. The man she least wanted to see, the man she had hoped would forget her, was here. And he was here for her. And nothing about her life would ever go back to the way it was before this morning. Harper stood frozen by the window, pulse hammering against her ribs, unable to move or breathe, as Damien Hale lifted his gaze and locked onto her like he had known exactly which window belonged to her all along. The pregnancy test was still in her hand, her fingers curled so tightly around it that she felt the edges digging into her skin, but her body would not respond, as though shock had rooted her to the floor. Lily whispered, "What did you do?" But Harper could not speak, could not answer, could not even begin to explain the collision of terror and disbelief ripping through her chest. Down on the street, Damien said something to his driver, and the man nodded sharply, stepping aside to make a clear path toward the building entrance. Harper watched helplessly as Damien strode forward with that controlled, predatory precision she had seen only once before in the server room, the night everything had changed. She jerked away from the window, panic surging as she stuffed the pregnancy test into her tote bag, zipped it shut, and grabbed her coat with trembling hands. The knock came 3 seconds later, loud and commanding, vibrating through the thin door like a warning. Lily mouthed good luck and fled into her room, leaving Harper alone with the echo of her heartbeat. She opened the door slowly, bracing herself, and there he was. Damien Hale, the billionaire tech legend who graced Forbes covers and congressional cybersecurity hearings, stood in the narrow, peeling paint hallway of her building, as if the Bronx ought to feel honored by his presence. He filled the space effortlessly, his sharp suit a stark contrast to the chipped floors and flickering fluorescent lights. His amber eyes swept over her cool and precise, cataloging everything from her pale skin to the shake in her breath. "Harper," he said quietly, the softness of her name somehow more dangerous than a shout. "We need to talk." She swallowed hard. How? How did you find me? I have resources, he replied without elaborating, his voice steady but edged with something sharper than annoyance, something that felt like concern, wrapped in fury. Concern made no sense. Fury made too much. She clutched her tote bag close to her chest, praying he could not hear the frantic beat of her heart. I have to get to work, she managed, trying to sidestep him. But Damien lifted one hand and blocked her path, with nothing but his presence commanding without touching. You disappeared, he said evenly. You left the gala early. You missed 3 days of work. And when I tried to contact you, your phone went straight to voicemail. I was sick, she whispered. Not a lie, but nowhere near the truth. And there is a more pressing issue, Damien continued, lowering his voice. One that concerns the company's security. Harper blinked. Security? Someone accessed HaleCorp servers the night of the gala. He said, studying her face, the way a machine scans for anomalies. The breach originated from a terminal you used. You were the last person near it. Her stomach dropped. I didn't do anything, I swear. I know, he said instantly, and that startled her enough to look up. His expression softened by a fraction. But someone used your credentials. Someone wanted it to look like you. Confusion and fear twisted inside her. This had nothing to do with the baby. Or did it? Could everything she feared be converging at once? Damien stepped closer, lowering his voice. Get your coat. We are leaving. I can't just leave with you, she protested, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. You can, he replied, and you will. This is an optional, Harper. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath stutter. Someone has already tried to paint you as an accomplice. I'm not letting you walk into a trap. His words stunned her into silence. Damien Hale, legendary for his ruthlessness and strategic mind, was here in her hallway claiming he was protecting her, or controlling her, or both. She slipped her coat on with stiff fingers and allowed him to guide her down the stairs, though he never touched her, never needed to. His presence was enough to steer her. Outside, he opened the SUV door for her, and the moment she stepped inside, the world shifted again, the cabin swallowing her with its leather interior, dark windows, and faint scent of cedar that clung to Damien's suits. He slid in beside her, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like the end of choices. Explain what happened after the gala, Damien said, watching her with that unnerving stillness of a hunter who never fires without purpose. Why did you vanish? She opened her mouth, searching for the lie she had rehearsed for weeks, but before she could speak, her bag tipped slightly, and something small and white rolled out from the unzipped seam, bouncing once against the floor mat. A pregnancy test. Positive. Harper's breath stopped completely as Damien bent down, picked it up, and turned it over in his hand. His expression did not change, but the air inside the SUV shifted, thickening with something electric and unspoken. Slowly, deliberately, Damien lifted his gaze to hers. Harper, he said softly, dangerously, what is this? The SUV seemed to shrink around them. Harper's throat closed. Tears stung her eyes. It's not what you think, she choked out. Damien's jaw tightened. Then tell me what I should think. I don't know yet. I'm not sure. It was the truth and a lie all at once. Is it yours? The question punched the air out of her lungs. No anger, no raised voice, just a low, controlled question that felt like a fault line cracking open beneath them. Before she could answer, the driver stiffened. Sir, he said quietly, we're being followed. Damien's eyes snapped to the rear camera, his voice dropping to steel. Change route, now. The SUV swerved sharply. Harper grabbed the seat as fear spiked through her. "Damien, what's happening?" But he didn't answer her. His gaze remained locked on the test in his hand. His voice was low, unyielding, and terrifyingly calm. "Harper, this isn't safe. You're coming with me." The SUV cut through Manhattan traffic with sharp precision, but Harper barely registered the motion. Because the moment Damien's questions settled between them, the air had thickened into something unbearable. A collision of panic and memory that dragged her backward in time, no matter how tightly she gripped the leather seat. The night she had tried to forget surged back all at once, vivid and relentless, as if her mind had been waiting for the exact moment when denial became impossible. 6 weeks earlier, she had stepped into the Met Tech Gala under blinking lights and thundering applause, blending in with the backstage staff in her all-black uniform headset, pressed to her ear as she relayed updates to the communications team. She had been exhausted from pulling double shifts to cover her rent, but grateful for the overtime pay. Harper remembered the grand chandelier casting waves of crystal light. Over the crowd remembered the way. The ballroom hummed with money and ambition, the kind of world she had only ever seen through a screen. And then she remembered when everything had gone wrong. A sudden alarm had echoed across the venue, flashing red lights, cutting through music and chatter. Someone's voice had crackled through her earpiece, frantic and sharp server malfunction East Wing. "Someone get down there." Harper had gone because she was the closest, sprinting down the carpeted hallway in heels too cheap to absorb shock. She pushed the heavy glass server room door, open just as the magnetic lock engaged behind her, trapping her inside. And she had not been alone. Damien Hale had stood near the server tower. Sleeves rolled up tie, loosened his expression, carved with something she had never imagined seeing on him: fear. Not panic, not frenzy, but a rare controlled fear that revealed pressure no one else seemed to notice in the billionaire who supposedly controlled every room he walked into. He had startled when he saw her, and for a moment she had felt equally exposed. "The alarm is false," he had muttered, turning back to the flickering screen. "We have a breach attempt. Someone is probing the firewall from inside the gala." Harper remembered stepping closer, asking quietly, "What do you need?" It was a question she regretted the moment it left her mouth, because Damien had turned and looked at her as if he had not expected help, not from someone like her, not from a 24-year-old assistant in scuffed heels and a borrowed watch. His eyes had softened just slightly. "Just keep calm," he said. "Everyone else outside panics when I panic." "You're panicking," she whispered before she could stop herself. He gave a half laugh, despite the tension. Only a little. Then the alarms blared louder, and the servers buzzed, and the two of them stood shoulder to shoulder in the dim flicker of red emergency lights, breathing the same charged air. Harper had tried to help, relaying error messages, calming him, when another warning flashed, and the strange intimacy of that small room wrapped around them like a cocoon. She had never seen Damien Hale like that, stripped of his usual perfection, the untouchable CEO, reduced to a man carrying too much weight alone. It was his vulnerability that undid her. When the alarms finally stopped, relief washing through the wiring as stabilizers kicked back, Damien had sagged against the counter and exhaled. Harper remembered placing a hand lightly on his arm, intending only to steady him, but the gesture broke something open. He reached up and covered her hand with his fingers warm and steady, and when he looked at her, The world outside that server room vanished. "Thank you," he had said softly, genuinely, as if she had done more than stand beside him. Her heartbeat had jumped, her breath catching in her throat. She had wanted to step back, but his presence pulled her closer instead. The moment stretched thin, electric, and impossible to control. Damien lifted a hand to brush a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch barely there, yet enough to send a spark down her spine. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. The tension between them snapped like a switch being flipped. He leaned in first, or maybe she did. She could never be sure. But suddenly his lips were on hers, urgent and warm and full of everything they were not supposed to feel. Harper remembered the way he kissed like he was starving, like he had spent years holding back every emotion and had finally let it break loose. She remembered the way her knees threatened to give out as he guided her back gently until her spine brushed the cool glass wall overlooking the glowing Manhattan skyline. The city spread out below them, glittering and limitless, while they stood hidden in the shadows, breathing each other in as if the moment might vanish if they did not hold on to it tightly enough. When he lifted her into his arms, she felt weightless, suspended between fear and longing, between the world she knew and the one he existed in. She remembered how he whispered her name like a promise against her throat, how he asked if she was sure, how she nodded because she had never been more certain of anything, and then the rest unraveled in a blur of heat and trembling hands and whispered breaths against glass, the city lights reflecting their silhouettes, as if even Manhattan were bearing witness to their impossible collision. But the morning after reality had come crashing back. Harper woke in Damien's penthouse suite above the gala ballroom, wrapped in warm sheets that did not belong to her, the skyline still glowing through the glass walls. Damien slept beside her, peaceful and unguarded, and the sight terrified her. She had dressed quietly, heart-pounding, leaving. Before he could open his eyes, before she could see regret or confusion or anger cloud his face, she had not been running from him. She had been running from the part of herself that had wanted to stay. The SUV jerked slightly as the driver changed lanes, snapping Harper back to the present as Damien's voice cut through the memory. "Harper," he said quietly, still holding the test in his hand. "The night of the gala, you left without a word." She stared at her trembling hands. It was a mistake, she whispered, though the crack in her voice betrayed her. "A moment. You don't need to think about it again." Damien's jaw clenched. "I have thought about it every single day." Her breath caught. "Damien." He shifted closer, his voice low but fierce. "You think I forgot? You think I didn't try to find you? You vanished like you were never there." She squeezed her eyes shut, overwhelmed by the truth she could no longer deny. That night had never been a mistake, not for either of them, and now the consequences of that night were growing inside her. She finally whispered the words she had never meant to say aloud. "I was afraid." Damien leaned in, slightly, his gaze scorching. "Afraid of me?" She swallowed hard. "Afraid of what you make me feel." Silence settled like a held breath, long and trembling. Damien's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded flickering in his eyes before he masked it again. "Harper," he murmured, voice low and rough. "Nothing about that night was a mistake." The SUV slowed suddenly. The driver muttered a curse. Damien's eyes narrowed. "We lost them," the driver said, glancing at the rear camera. Damien exhaled once, then looked back at her. "But this changes nothing. You're not walking away from this. Not again." Harper could not breathe. not under his gaze, not under the weight of the past, not under the weight of the future, resting quietly beneath her trembling hands. The SUV glided to a smoother stretch of road, but inside the cabin, the air felt painfully tight, as if every breath pressed against the unspoken truth hovering between them. Damien still held the pregnancy test in his hand, the small plastic object looking impossibly fragile against his strong fingers, and Harper felt her pulse pounding so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. His gaze never left her steady, unblinking, too sharp to hide from. "Harper," he said finally, voice low, but heavy with a controlled tension that made her spine stiffen. "We are done circling around this. I need an answer." She clasped her hands together in her lap to stop their shaking. Her throat felt raw, as if the truth itself scraped against her. Damien leaned in slightly, the dim overhead lights casting a soft glow on his jaw, highlighting the restrained fury and something more desperate flickering beneath. "Whose child is this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the question hit like a collision of worlds she had spent weeks trying to keep separate. Harper closed her eyes for half a second, fighting tears, fighting the memory of his hands on her, the memory of him calling her name with a tenderness he probably did not remember. "I don't know how to tell you," she whispered, her voice cracking with panic. Damien's jaw tightened, his breath steady but strained. "Then try," he said, softer than before, but unmistakably firm. "Before I make assumptions you do not want me to make." The threat was not violence, it was control, it was fear, it was the possibility that he believed she was capable of lying to him on a level that would fracture everything between them. "Damien, please," she whispered, gripping her knees. "I'm still trying to process it myself." He studied her, analyzing every twitch, every breath, every hesitation. 6 weeks, he said quietly. "It has been 6 weeks since the gala." The words hung between them, heavy and precise. Harper swallowed hard, nodding. Damien exhaled, once a slow sound, filled with 1,000 unspoken conclusions. "And I was the only person with you that night." His tone was steady, but there was something raw underneath it, something that sounded like fear, swirling beneath steel. Harper opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the SUV made a sudden sharp turn, the tires skidding lightly on the wet asphalt. The driver muttered under his breath, checking the mirror again. Damien shot forward, bracing a hand on the center console as he barked report. "Still being followed, sir," the driver said, voice tense. "Black sedan 2 cars back, matching our turns." Harper's breath hitched as fear flooded her chest. "Who is following us?" Damien did not answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the rear display, where a dark sedan blended into traffic like a shadow. Then he looked at her again, but the softness from moments ago had hardened into something colder, more dangerous. "Put the partition up," he ordered. The tinted divider rose with a soft mechanical hum, sealing them into a quiet, isolated bubble. The sense of privacy only made Harper's heartbeat louder. Damien dragged a hand through his hair, then lowered his eyes to the pregnancy test again, turning it between his fingers. "I need honesty from you, Harper," he said, "now more than ever." She forced herself to breathe. "I am being honest," she whispered. "I'm terrified, Damien. Everything in my life is falling apart. I woke up sick for days. I panicked. I wasn't trying to hide anything from you out of malice. I was trying to convince myself my life wasn't about to change." Damien's eyes flicked up sharply. "Your life changed the night you left me sleeping in that penthouse." Her breath stilled. She had never expected him to mention it so bluntly. "I left because I didn't belong there," she said, air shaking as it escaped her. "I didn't belong with you." He reached forward so suddenly she flinched, but his hand only landed on the headrest beside her, pinning her gently with his gaze. "Do not decide that for me." The words were soft but powerful, heavy, with a meaning she was not prepared to hold. Her voice wavered. "I thought it was a mistake. Nothing about that night was a mistake." He said, his stare burning into her, and you know it. Harper's eyes stung. Her pulse throbbed in her throat. "Damien, please. Everything is too much. The test, the server, breach, the people following us. I cannot think." Instead of softening, he grew still, too still the way he did. In boardrooms before, he attacked a problem from every angle. "Those cars are not random," he admitted after a long beat. "My security team flagged unusual surveillance patterns around HaleCorp this week. Someone is watching my employees, watching you." Harper froze, horror washing over her. "Me? Why me? I have nothing that anyone wants." Damien shook his head slowly. "That is what worries me." His hand finally dropped from the headrest, brushing her shoulder, in the process sending a shiver down her spine, even in the thick fog of fear. "Harper," he said, voice lower, heavier, "whoever is behind the breach knows we were together that night." Her stomach dropped violently. "How could they know? Because they are not after you," Damien said, leaning closer until their faces were inches apart. "They are after me, and you are the easiest point of leverage." Harper pressed a trembling hand to her mouth as panic twisted inside her. "What do you mean, leverage?" Damien's voice softened only a fraction. "Someone is trying to get to me, either personally or professionally, and you are the only person who connects both." Her world spun. So the break in the server room, the surveillance, the cars following us, everything, not coincidence, he finished. "And until I know who is behind it, you are not safe." She shook her head. "This is insane. I can't just disappear with you. I have a job, a life, responsibilities." Damien's expression darkened with something protective enough to be frightening. "If I leave you exposed, someone will use you again." Harper let out a shaky breath. "Damien," she whispered, "I am not your responsibility." He looked at the pregnancy test in his hand one last time, closing his fingers around it like a vow. "If this child is mine," he said quietly, "then everything about you is my responsibility." Her heart cracked open, fear and longing colliding painfully. Another jolt shook the car as the driver swerved again. Damien pressed the intercom button. "Penthouse. Secure route." "Yes, sir." Harper's voice trembled. "Where are you taking me?" Damien held her gaze, steady and unyielding. "Somewhere safe." The SUV accelerated, the city lights streaking by in blurred lines. Damien leaned closer, his voice low enough that she felt it more than heard it. "Harper, this is not just about the test or the past or what happened between us. Someone is targeting you to get to me, and I will not let them." She stared at him, breath breaking in her chest. "Damien," but he did not give her space to refuse, or run, or hide. His final words settled over her like a lock sliding into place. "You are coming with me." The SUV shot upward through midtown traffic, weaving through one-way streets and narrowed construction lanes with practiced precision. And although Harper pressed her palms against her knees to steady herself, and thing inside her felt steady, the city blurred into streaks of motion outside the tinted windows. But inside the cabin, Damien watched her with an intensity she could feel even when she avoided his gaze. Every time she shifted her hands or breathed too sharply, She sensed his attention on her, as though he were tracking every tremor. When the vehicle finally slowed before a private underground entrance beneath a sleek tower of glass, Harper's stomach twisted. The building soared upward like a steel blade cutting into the Manhattan sky, the kind of place she had walked past 100 times without daring to imagine stepping inside. Hale Tower, his home, his world. A world so far from her own, it might as well have belonged to another planet. The SUV descended a restricted ramp, the lights dimming as they entered a security bay lined with scanners and armed guards. Harper's breath caught as the car doors opened simultaneously. Damien stepped out first, giving a nod to the head of security, a tall woman with sharp eyes who scanned Harper with suspicion before tapping a code into the wall panel. Clear the level, Damien ordered, his tone calm but firm. I want all surveillance rerouted and the elevator sealed until I say otherwise. His guard nodded sharply and spoke into her mic. Doors opened, lights flickered. The world shifted at the command of one man. Harper hesitated in the SUV doorway, gripping her tote bag like a lifeline. Damien turned back to her, the overhead lights outlining his silhouette, in a sharp contrast of shadow and steel. Come on, Harper, he said softly, not unkindly, but undeniably, in a tone that expected her to obey. Her legs trembled as she stepped out. The concrete floor was cold through the thin soles of her shoes, and she felt painfully aware of how small she looked among men and women in tactical uniforms. Damien approached her with a slower, more deliberate pace this time, as if sensing her shock, and placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, without touching, fully guiding her toward the private elevator that responded only to his fingerprint and retinal scan. The doors slid shut behind them with a soft whisper, sealing her into the quiet, vertical capsule where the city noise vanished completely. Harper felt her throat tighten at the sudden silence. Damien noticed. You are safe here, he said. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to trust me. You keep saying that, she whispered shakily, that I'm in danger, that someone is after me, but you still haven't told me why. Because I do not have the full picture yet, Damien replied. His gaze fixed forward, though she could see tension coiling beneath his calm exterior. But I know enough to say this. Someone accessed HaleCorp's internal systems using your credentials. Someone surveillance-flagged cars tailing you. Someone wants you vulnerable. Harper hugged her arms around her body. But why me? I'm nobody, Damien. He lowered his eyes to her, and the faintest softness flickered across his features. You are not nobody. Her breath caught. The elevator opened into a private hallway, wrapped in soft lighting and clean marble, leading to a door with no visible lock. Damien pressed his hand against a sleek panel. The door slid open silently. Harper stepped inside and her breath hitched again. The penthouse was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline in glass. The space was bathed in warm morning light, reflecting across polished floors, minimalist furniture, chilled air, and the faint scent of cedar lingering in the air, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. Damien's world was spacious, controlled quiet, and so breathtakingly expensive, she felt as if she had walked into a dream she had no right to occupy. Why am I here? She whispered, unable to look away from the view, swallowing half the horizon. Because out there you are exposed, Damien said, stepping past her to set the pregnancy test on the marble counter with almost ceremonial care. But in here you are protected. No one enters without my authorization. The weight of those words pressed against her ribs, protected or trapped. She watched him loosen his tie, roll up his sleeves, shed tension in a way that made him look more human, more real, more dangerously close to the man she remembered from the server room. "I cannot let you go back home," Damien continued. "Your apartment is too easy to breach, too predictable, too vulnerable." "Damien," she whispered, "you cannot keep me here." "I am not keeping you," he said, voice firm. "I am protecting you." "It feels the same," she murmured. His jaw tightened, frustration flickering across his face. "You do not understand the threat yet. Someone is orchestrating this, someone who wants leverage. And until I know why, I will not give them the opportunity to use you. Use me," for what he hesitated. And that hesitation chilled her more than the elevator silence. "Harper," he said slowly, "someone wants access to information I have. Information about a cyber defense project HaleCorp is launching next quarter. If they control the narrative or breach the system before we release it, the financial and political consequences could cripple half the tech industry." Harper blinked. "What does that have to do with me?" Damien stepped forward, a shadow of regret crossing his eyes. "Because your login was used to infiltrate the system, and I am certain you were targeted specifically because of your connection to me." Her heart lurched painfully. "I don't have a connection to you." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "We both know that is not true." She shook her head, backing a step away, as if distance would undo the meaning behind his words. "No, that night was just a moment, a mistake. You cannot pretend it was more." Damien closed the distance again, with a single deliberate step close enough that she could feel his breath against her temple. "Harper, everything changed for me. That night," he said, voice steady, but laced with something raw. "I tried to forget. I failed." The confession hit her like a blow. He reached up, stopping inches from her cheek, not touching but close enough to make her inhale sharply. "You think I am doing all this because I want to control you, but the truth is I am terrified." She stared at him, stunned. Of what Damien exhaled, a rare tremor slipping into his voice. "Of losing you before I have the chance to understand why I can't stop thinking about you." Her chest tightened painfully. She turned away to steady herself, her gaze landing unintentionally on the pregnancy test resting on the marble counter like a silent witness. Damien followed her line of sight. He walked forward slowly, picked it up again, then set it down with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "If the child is mine," he whispered, "I will protect you with everything I have." Harper swallowed hard. "Damien, I don't even know what I want yet." "Then decide here," he said softly, "without fear, without noise, without anyone manipulating you from the outside." She shook her head. "I don't belong in this world." Damien stepped closer again, his voice rough. "You belong wherever you are safe." "Safe is not the same as free," she said. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe understanding, maybe regret, maybe something more dangerous. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her arm lightly. The contact sent a tremor through her. "Harper," he whispered, "let me protect you, just until we know what we are dealing with." Her voice trembled despite her efforts. "And if the baby is yours," Damien's hand slid gently, barely a brush, to her lower stomach, hesitant yet reverent, a touch filled with a shockingly tender fear. "Then everything changes," he murmured. She felt the truth ripple through her like a pulse. She felt herself break. and she realized that for the first time since the test turned positive, she was not facing her terror alone. Harper stood completely still as Damien's hand hovered near her stomach, a gesture so gentle and careful it felt impossible coming from a man known in the tech world as unshakable and relentless. When he finally lowered his hand, stepping back to give her room to breathe, she felt an ache so conflicting it almost splintered her. The penthouse seemed too quiet, too large, too heavy. With all the truths they were trying not to say, Harper turned away, hugging her arms around herself as she walked toward the tall windows, staring out at the Manhattan skyline like it held answers she could not find in her own heartbeat. Lights flickered far below, distant and small, while the storm inside her felt too big to contain. "Damien," she whispered, not turning around. "Why me? Why would anyone target me? I'm barely even important at Hale Corp. I handle press drafts and internal memos. I schedule meetings. I bring people coffee." She heard him move behind her slow steps on the cool floor. "That is exactly why," he said quietly. "People who look harmless are the easiest to exploit." She closed her eyes as dread pooled in her stomach. "I swear I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he said instantly, the certainty in his voice sharp enough to cut through her panic. "But someone wanted to make it look like you did. And they used someone close to you to do it." Harper stiffened, her heart dropping into panic. She turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" Damien hesitated, and that hesitation made her chest tighten. "Harper," he said carefully, "your bank account has irregular withdrawals, cash transfers that correspond with known debt collectors." Her blood ran cold. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, Damien, please. You can't have looked into that." His expression didn't change. "I had to." She stepped back as though the words physically hit her. "You looked into my bank." Her voice broke. "My life." "Because someone used your identity to access company credentials," he said, his tone gentler than his words. "It was the fastest way to understand who might have access to your information." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "This is insane." He took a cautious step toward her. "Harper, I need to know something. Are you helping someone? Anyone who might have pressured you?" She let out a strangled laugh, equal parts anger and despair. "Helping someone, Damien. I barely keep myself together." He studied her face, softening. "Then who has access to your accounts?" Her hands fell to her sides, her breath caught, and she broke. "My brother," she whispered. Damien's expression sharpened, not with judgment, but recognition. "Tell me everything." Harper sank onto the arm of the sofa, pressing her palms into her eyes as tears burned hot. "My brother Liam, he's been struggling for years. Gambling started as a stupid hobby. Then it became this monster he couldn't control. Debt collectors got involved. Then worse people who take phones and hack accounts, and threaten to hurt you if you refuse to pay. He used my bank info to cover his debts. I didn't know it had escalated until too late." Damien exhaled slowly, absorbing every word. "So someone had access to your credentials through him." She nodded miserably. "I don't know how they got it. He must have given them something without realizing what it meant. Maybe he thought he was paying off one more threat. Maybe he thought he could fix it before I noticed." "These people are not amateurs," Damien said. "They don't stop at money. If they got into your digital footprint, they could easily replicate your login. They used you because they assumed no one would look twice." A tear slid down her cheek. "I tried to help him. I tried to pull him out. But the more I helped, the deeper he sank." Damien crouched in front of her, something achingly gentle flickering in his usually guarded eyes. "Harper, look at me." She hesitated but lifted her gaze. "Nothing about this is your fault," he said firmly. "You were targeted because you are vulnerable to someone else's mistakes. That is not the same as being guilty." A small sob escaped her. "I'm not strong enough for this, Damien. I'm not built for danger or scandals or corporate warfare." "You survived growing up in the Bronx," he said quietly. "You survived the MedTech chaos. You survived me." Her breath hitched. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. "You are stronger than you think." She looked away, the city lights blurring as tears gathered. "Everything is falling apart." "It is not," he said. "Not while I have breath in my body." Before she could answer, the penthouse lights flickered. Then once more. A low humming noise vibrated through the floor. Damien stiffened instantly. "Get down." He lunged toward her just as a window sensor beeped, followed by a sudden shower of sparks from the smart glass panels. Harper gasped as the lights snapped off, plunging them into dim emergency glow. The temperature dropped instantly as the automated security shutters jammed halfway. "Damien, what is happening?" she cried. He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind the thick structural pillar. "A breach attempt on the penthouse system," he said through clenched teeth. "Someone is overriding the external sensors." Harper's heart pounded so violently she felt dizzy. "But how can they breach this place?" "It's supposed to be secure." "It is," Damien said. His jaw tightened, which means someone with high-level tech capabilities is orchestrating this. The hallway control panel sparked, sending a burst of light across the marble. Harper screamed. Damien pulled her flush against him, shielding her body with his one arm around her shoulders as he guided her toward the reinforced inner corridor. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low and commanding. "Do not let go." She clung to his jacket as the building security alarms began to echo. Then a loud crack erupted, a bullet hole spider webbed across the far window. Harper's breath froze. "They're shooting," she whispered in horror. Damien moved them faster, shoving open the heavy door to the inner safe room. But not before another bullet hit the glass, sending a jagged line across its surface. He slammed the door shut behind them and activated the metal barrier. The room plunged into darkness, except for the faint emergency lights along the ceiling. Harper trembled uncontrollably, chest heaving. Damien reached for her, pulling her close enough that she could feel the pounding of his heart against her cheek. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice rough. "I've got you." "I can't breathe," she whispered. "I'm so scared." Damien cupped her jaw gently. "You are safe with me. No one will touch you, no one." Tears spilled over her lashes. "Why is this happening? Because someone wants to destabilize HaleCorp," he said. "And they think hurting you will hurt me." She froze, then whispered, "Does it?" Damien stared at her eyes burning through the shadows. "Yes," he said, voice shaking for the first time. More than anything, she swallowed, overwhelmed. She had felt alone for weeks, drowning in fear and confusion. But now there was a terrifying clarity in the way he held her, as though losing her was the one thing he could not afford. Another faint thud echoed from beyond the safe room door. Harper flinched, pressing closer to him. Damien tightened his arms protectively. "Listen to me," he said slowly, each word a vow carved in steel. No one lays a finger on what is mine." She stiffened, breath catching in her throat. "Damien." He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers, a gesture so tender it hollowed her completely. "I'm not letting the world take you from me." he whispered. Not now, not ever. And in that small steel-walled room, wrapped in danger and fear and a truth that neither of them could outrun any more, Harper realized something with devastating clarity. She was no longer afraid of him. She was afraid of how much she needed him. The safe room hummed with low emergency power, casting a faint amber glow across the metallic walls, and Harper felt the trembling in her body slowly shift from terror into something heavier, something that made her chest ache with a pressure she could no longer ignore. Damien still held her, as though the world outside that steel door had teeth, as though letting her go for even a second might risk losing her in ways far worse than a hacker's bullet. His breath was uneven when he finally pulled back enough to look at her, his hands still braced along her arms, steadying her, even though he looked like he needed steadying himself. "Harper," he said softly, almost like her name itself was fragile. "I need you to listen to me." She swallowed her heartbeat, loud in her ears. "I am." Damien's eyes darkened, some mix of fear, anger, and longing twisting together. "I should have told you this weeks ago. I should have said it the moment you walked out of that penthouse after the gala." Her breath caught. "Damien." He shook his head once as if refusing to let her interrupt. "I looked for you," he said quietly. "Every day, every night. I asked HR for your schedule. I passed by your office more times than I can admit. And every time I didn't see you, something in me felt—" He hesitated, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Wrong, incomplete. Harper blinked rapidly as her chest tightened. She had imagined 1,000 times that she'd been nothing more than a passing mistake, a momentary lapse from a man who lived in another reality. She never imagined he would say anything like this. "You don't have to say that," she whispered, voice cracking. "The night at the gala, it was intense. It was unexpected, but you don't need to rewrite it." Damien stepped forward sharply, closing the inches between them. "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm telling you the truth." His breath brushed her cheek, warm in the cold metal room. "I tried to forget you. I tried to pretend it meant nothing. But every time I pictured that night, every time I remembered the way you looked at me right before you kissed me, it felt like something I had no right to want again." Harper's pulse stuttered. "Damien, I ran because I was afraid. I thought you'd wake up and regret it. I thought you'd see me and wonder how a girl like me ended up in your bed." Damien's expression twisted with something close to pain. "You think I regret touching you?" Her lips parted, but she couldn't speak. He reached up slowly, fingertips brushing the side of her jaw, with a touch so gentle it contradicted the violence happening just feet beyond the safe room. "Harper," he whispered, "I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment you left." Her breath fractured into pieces. Tears stung her eyes again, but this time not from fear. She had never felt so wanted and so terrified of the same man at the same time. "Damien," she whispered, "everything is happening so fast. I don't know what any of this means. The danger, the breach, the pregnancy." He closed his eyes briefly at the last word, as if it sent a tremor through him he wasn't prepared to hide. When he opened them again, they were darker, deeper, filled with something that felt dangerously close to vulnerability. "Is it mine?" he asked softly, the quiet rawness of the question breaking through all of his armor. Harper pressed her lips together as tears slipped free. It was the moment she had been avoiding, the truth she had been choking on, the fear that had kept her up every night. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man beneath the billionaire, the one she met in the server room before titles and expectations and hierarchies had returned. She saw the man who had kissed her like she was something worth trembling for. She nodded once. Damien inhaled sharply, as though the breath had been knocked from him. His hand dropped to her waist, steadying himself. "Harper," he whispered, "say it." Her voice broke as she whispered back, "Yes, it's yours." The silence that followed was not empty. It pulsed alive, shaped by everything they had been holding back. Damien closed the distance so suddenly she gasped, his forehead resting against hers, his hands sliding to her face as if anchoring himself. "Mine," he said under his breath, like the word was both a vow and a prayer. "My child, my responsibility, my—" He swallowed hard. "My mistake would have been letting you walk away again." Harper trembled, her tears falling freely now. Damien brushed them away, with his thumbs, each touch feather soft, each movement full of the kind of tenderness she never believed this man possessed. "I'm scared," she whispered. "More scared than I've ever been." "So am I," he admitted, surprising her. "I've built an empire on control, on calculation, on predictability. And then you walked into that server room, and every piece of logic I've ever lived by burned to the ground." She let out a shaky laugh, half breath, half sob. "I didn't do anything. You did everything," he murmured. His fingers slid into her hair, slow and reverent. "You looked at me like I was human." Her heart collapsed in on itself. Before she could speak, another faint thud echoed from outside the room, followed by the low hiss of security lockdown mechanisms engaging. She flinched, but Damien tightened his arm around her waist, pulling her firmly against him. "They won't get in," he murmured against her hair. "Not here. What if they do?" "Then they will get me," he said. "Not you." She gripped his shirt, breath trembling. "I don't want anything to happen to you." Damien stilled. Then slowly, as though the acknowledgement changed something inside him, he cupped her face again and lifted her chin. "Harper," he whispered, "tell me you care." She swallowed. Her voice shook. "I do." His eyes softened in a way she had never seen before. He leaned in as though drawn by gravity itself, brushing his lips against her forehead, then her cheek, then pausing just inches from her mouth, as if begging for permission. Harper exhaled, her breath mingling with his. "Damien," she whispered, "I'm so afraid of what you make me feel." "And I'm afraid of not feeling it," he murmured. That was what broke her. She surged forward, closing the final inch between them, kissing him with all the fear and longing she had buried for 6 endless weeks. Damien responded instantly, desperately pulling her tight against his chest, as though she were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. His kiss was not the controlled, precise one of a CEO. It was the unsteady, raw confession of a man who had been drowning alone. Harper melted into him, the room disappearing, the danger fading into the background, till there was only his breath, his hands, his whispered, "I've missed you," against her mouth. When they finally pulled apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers again, breathing hard, his voice rough. "You are staying with me now," he whispered, "not because I'm forcing you, because I cannot lose you." Her lips trembled. "I don't know how to live in your world, Damien." "Then I'll meet you in yours," he said, "wherever that is." She pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat slam into her palm. "This is going to change everything." Damien nodded, gaze soft but fierce. "Then let it." Another thud echoed through the safe room door, but neither of them flinched this time, because something had shifted between them. something irreversible. And Harper knew that from this moment on, danger was no longer the only truth consuming her life. So was Damien. The moment their lips parted, the air shifted, not soft, not gentle, but charged with a sharp awareness that the world outside the safe room had not stopped moving, just because they had finally stopped running from the truth. Damien brushed his thumb along Harper's cheek one last time before standing, his expression sharpening as he moved toward the door panel. The tenderness remained in his eyes, but something colder and far more dangerous resurfaced beneath it. "Stay behind me," he said, typing a rapid sequence into the touchscreen. "I need to see how deep this breach went." The panel flashed red. Access denied. He inhaled slowly, jaw tightening. Someone jammed the override. Harper swallowed. "So we're stuck." "No," he said, stepping back. "We're being watched." The emergency lights flickered again as the safe room's internal interface displayed a single message across the steel wall in flickering projection. "Hello, Damien." Harper's blood turned to ice. "Someone is inside your system enough to talk to you." "Inside my system," Damien murmured, eyes narrowing and arrogant enough to leave a signature. "Who would do this?" Harper whispered, hugging her arms around herself as fear crawled along her spine. Damien stared at the message, then exhaled in a quiet, lethal tone that Harper had never heard from him before. "Elias Mercer." Harper blinked, who Damien turned to her slowly. His expression, usually controlled and unreadable, was now carved with a dark tension. "CEO of SkyShield Cyber, my biggest competitor in defense tech. Former collaborator, now my biggest threat." Harper tried to piece the fragments together. "What does he want with me?" The safe room projection glitched again, a new message unfurling like a taunt. "Does she know she's your weakness?" Her stomach flipped violently. Damien moved so fast she barely saw him, slamming the emergency projector off with the heel of his hand. His breath was sharp, furious. "He wants leverage," Damien growled, pacing the length of the small room. "He's been trying to get access to HaleCorp's defense prototype for months. We rejected his partnership offer. He knows he cannot beat us in development, so he's trying to destabilize us instead." "By pinning a security breach on me," Harper whispered. "By using you to get to me," Damien corrected. He stopped pacing and faced her fully. "Elias always studies weaknesses. And 6 weeks ago at the gala, he saw me leave the ballroom. He saw the servers crash. He saw you." Her breath caught. "You think he saw us in the server wing?" "He didn't see what happened," Damien said, "but he saw the way I looked at you when you left." Her pulse stumbled. "I don't remember being looked at." Damien let out a humorless breath. "I do." His voice was softer now, shadowed by something vulnerable. "I'm not good at hiding anything when it comes to you." Harper pressed a trembling hand to her mouth as the realization settled. Elias Mercer had been watching her ever since the gala, following her, using Liam's debt to breach her accounts, using her login to frame her, using the pregnancy test that had fallen into Damien's hands to twist the emotional knife even deeper. She felt sick. Damien knelt in front of her, gripping her shaking hands. "Listen to me," he said, voice low and urgent. "Elias thinks I will collapse under pressure if he threatens what I care about." She swallowed hard. "Which is me." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted her hands to his chest, pressing them against the steady, hard beat of his heart. "I didn't realize how much he whispered until he targeted you." Emotion pricked her eyes, but fear still cut through everything else. "What happens now?" Now Damien said, rising to his full height, I show him he made the biggest mistake of his life. He typed another code into the door panel. The red flashing icon changed to blue. The safe room bolts disengaged with a metallic groan. Harper's breath hitched. Is it safe? My security system rerouted, Damien said. They'll escort us to an off-grid location where Elias can't reach you. The door slid open, revealing 2 armed guards waiting. One of them, a stocky man with a shaved head, nodded. Helicopter is ready, sir. Harper's pulse spiked. Helicopter fastest way out, Damien said, placing a hand at the small of her back. Sky Shield cannot intercept encrypted aerial routes. Harper followed him through the dim hallway, flanked by security. Every step felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life, someone else's movie, someone else's danger. But when Damien opened the penthouse's private roof entrance, the crisp night air hit her face, and reality came rushing back. The helicopter waited, blades turning slowly, its sleek frame gleaming under rooftop lights. Damien helped her into the cabin before climbing in beside her, taking her hand as the engine roared to life. Where are we going? She shouted over the rising hum. Damien leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. A federal safe house I helped fund for cybercrime cases. Only 3 people know its coordinates. Harper nodded, though fear knotted in her stomach. But as they lifted off the rooftop and the city unfurled beneath them in glittering threads of gold, she felt something else too. Relief. Damien didn't let go of her hand, even as the lights below blurred and the world shrank into a patchwork of city blocks. She leaned her head against the cool window, exhaustion gently catching up to her as the helicopter cut through the night. Damien watched her the entire time, his thumb brushing the back of her hand in small, absent strokes that she suspected he didn't even realize he was doing. When they landed at a remote compound surrounded by forest and steel barriers, Harper felt her fear rise again. But the moment she stepped onto the ground, Damien's hand slid around her waist, steadying her. You're safe here, he said. No one gets past these walls. Damien, she whispered. What if Elias won't stop? He won't, Damien said. But neither will I. Inside the secure facility, a doctor in a white coat waited, greeting Damien with a nod. You wanted health evaluated, both of them. Harper's breath stilled. Both Damien's expressions softened. I need to know you're okay, he said quietly. And the baby? Her eyes flooded with emotion she didn't know how to contain. She followed the doctor into an exam room while Damien waited outside, pacing like a caged tiger. When the doctor finally finished the scan, he handed Harper a small printed ultrasound image. She stared at it as tears gathered. The doctor nodded. Healthy pregnancy, 6 weeks, strong start. Harper pressed the image to her chest. But when she stepped out of the room, Damien turned, instantly scanning her face for answers. Harper, he breathed. She handed him the image. Damien froze. The hardened CEO slowly lifted the grainy picture, staring at it with a kind of awe she had never seen on him. His throat moved once, twice. Then his eyes softened so deeply she felt them in her bones. This is real, he whispered. Harper nodded. Yes. Damien reached out as if asking permission. When she nodded again, he pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. His voice broke. I'm going to protect you, both of you, I swear it. She closed her eyes as warmth flooded her chest. But the moment she pulled back, the compound lights flickered the exact same way they had in the penthouse. Damien's expression snapped into focus. He found us. The intercom buzzed. A guard's voice cut through. "Sir, you need to see this." They rushed to the operations room where a dozen screens displayed news headlines rapidly updating. Billionaire Damien Hale involved in scandal, with employee HaleCorp CEO accused of covering up breach with pregnant staffer. A grainy photo appeared. Harper gasped. It was her, entering the helicopter with Damien's hand at her waist. Damien's jaw tightened. Harper felt the blood drain from her face. "Elias leaked it," Damien said, eyes burning with cold fury. "He wants the world to turn against us." Harper pressed a hand to her chest, breathing hard. "Damien, what do we do?" He turned to her, slowly, voice low and certain. "We fight." She swallowed. How his gaze locked with hers, fierce and protective. Together. The operations room throbbed with the cold heartbeat of machine screens flashing one after another, as the scandal detonated across every news outlet in the country. Harper stood frozen in the center of the room, her breath quickening as the headlines multiplied, each one sharper than the last. Billionaire Damien Hale, under investigation, pregnant employee. Linked to cyber attack, insider scandal, shakes HaleCorp. Her photo appeared in the corner of nearly every headline, sometimes blurred, sometimes sharp, always damning. Damien stood beside her shoulders, squared his expression, ice carved by fury. "Elias wanted a war," he murmured, voice low and lethal, "and he's going to get one." Harper pressed a trembling hand to her chest, unable to focus on anything but the flood of images and accusations on the monitors. "Damien," she whispered, "everyone will assume the worst. They'll think you slept with me to cover up the breach. They'll think I'm some parasite clinging to you." His jaw clenched. "I don't care what they think." "But I do," she said, her voice breaking. "They're ripping my name apart. They're destroying everything I've worked for. And," she hesitated, breath shuddering, "they're destroying you too." Damien turned to her as though he couldn't believe she would even say something like that. "Harper, none of this touches me the way it touches you. They can take my company, they can take my reputation, but I will not let them take your safety." The head of security, a stern woman named Lena, stepped closer. "We need to prepare a statement, sir. Rumors are spreading fast." Damien's eyes flicked to her. "Not yet. Sir, with respect, the board is demanding answers." "The board can wait," Damien snapped. "They have no authority over my personal life." "Your personal life," Harper whispered, staring at the screens in horror, "is crashing publicly because of me." Damien's head whipped toward her. "Because of Elias," he corrected sharply, "not you." But Harper couldn't hear him past the roar of shame in her chest. On one of the screens, a video compilation showed clips of her walking into HaleCorp carrying coffee, smiling politely. The narrator's voice dripped with insinuation. Sources say the employee was seen entering Hale's private helicopter. Another headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Who is Harper Quinn, the woman at the center of the Hale scandal?" Harper turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Damien reached for her shoulder, but she stepped back, shaking. "I can't breathe," she whispered. I can't do this, Harper," he said softly. "Look at me." She shook her head. "I don't want to see any of it. I don't want you to see me like this." "Like what? Like the reason your entire empire is falling apart." Damien's expression twisted with something fierce and frustrated. "You are not the reason. Elias wants control, and he is using the only pressure point he thinks I'll break for." His eyes softened the barest fraction. "He isn't wrong about that." Harper's heart flipped painfully. Before she could reply, Lena approached again. Sir, your legal team is requesting immediate contact. The stock value is dropping, investors are panicking. If you don't speak soon, Damien's voice snapped like a whip. I do not care about investors right now. I care about keeping Harper alive. Lena held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and stepped back. Harper stared at Damien, stunned by the intensity of his loyalty. But the fear that had been building inside her began to outgrow even that. Damien, she whispered, this isn't sustainable. You can't protect me and run a corporation and fight Elias all at once. Watch me, he said. But there was something hollow at the edges of his voice, a crack beginning to form beneath the weight of the entire world pressing down on him. Harper stepped closer, touching his arm gently. You don't have to be everything at once. Yes, I do, he said quietly. Because if I don't, I risk losing everything that matters. She opened her mouth to tell him she didn't want him sacrificing the world for her, but a sudden commotion at the far end of the room cut her off. An analyst rushed in, holding a tablet. Sir, you need to see this. Elias's lawyers just filed an injunction to freeze HaleCorp assets related to the defense prototype. Damien's shoulders tensed. On what grounds? They claim you compromised national security by involving a non-cleared civilian who has direct access to sensitive information. Harper's breath hitched. That's me, she whispered. They're using me as evidence. The analyst nodded grimly. They're building a narrative that you shared confidential information with her and that she sabotaged the system during your relationship. The words sliced through Harper like a blade. Damien's eyes darkened with something dangerously close to violence. This is a fabricated attack, he said, and a sloppy one. Sloppy but effective, the analyst replied. Public opinion is shifting fast, and your board is calling for an emergency meeting. Harper watched Damien run a hand through his hair, tension rippling through every line of him. I don't have time for them, Sir Lena said softly. If you don't speak to them, they may attempt to remove you as CEO. Harper's stomach dropped. Damien, no. He exhaled slowly, but his gaze never left her. I don't care about the title, but I do, she whispered fiercely. I care that you're losing everything because of me. Not because of you, he said gently. Because Elias wanted a weak spot, and I am that weak spot, she whispered, voice trembling. Harper, Damien murmured. You are not a weakness. You are the only thing that makes any of this worth fighting for. Before she could process the words, a new alert flashed on the largest screen. Harper Quinn's family speaks out. Her heart stopped. A shaky video appeared of her brother Liam, pale-faced eyes darting nervously. Harper is in trouble, he said into the camera. I think she's being manipulated. Harper felt her legs weaken. No, she whispered. No, Liam, what have you done? The reporter's voiceover twisted the knife. Sources say Harper's financial records show connections to known criminal groups. Damien stepped in front of her, blocking her view of the screen with his body. But she could still hear it, and the damage was already done. She covered her face with her hands, shaking violently. He sold me out, she choked. My own brother sold me out. Damien wrapped an arm around her shoulders, but she pulled away, collapsing into a chair as sobs racked her chest. Harper, he said softly, kneeling in front of her. This is manipulation. Elias is cornering him. He's not choosing this on his own. That doesn't make it hurt any less, she whispered. Damien reached for her hands. I'm here, look at me. But she couldn't. Her mind spiraled, each thought sharper than the next. The headlines, the photos, the betrayal, the danger. and then the worst one. "You have to let me go," she said suddenly. Damien froze. "No, you have to," she insisted, standing, even though her legs shook. "As long as I'm near you, Elias will keep attacking. Your board will turn on you. Your company will fall apart because of me." "Harper," he said, rising with her, "you leaving does not stop Elias. It only gives him exactly what he wants." She shook her head, tears streaming. "You don't understand. This is too big, too dangerous. You're risking everything. Your company, your life, your future." She took a step back, voice breaking. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you have built." Damien's face tightened with raw pain. "You were never the reason. You are the reason I'm fighting." But Harper was already pulling away. "I need to protect you too," she whispered. "Right now the only thing I can do is remove myself before I hurt you any more than I already have." Damien reached out his hand, closing around her wrist, his voice shaking for the first time. "Harper, don't do this. Don't walk away from me." She bit her trembling lip. "If I stay, you'll lose your company. And if I stay long enough, you might lose your freedom." "I don't care," he said fiercely. She pulled her wrist free. "I do." And before he could stop her, she turned and ran down the hallway, ignoring Lena's shout and the guards stepping aside in shock. "Harper!" Damien yelled, racing after her. "Harper, stop." But she didn't. She reached the exit door, slammed her body weight into it, and burst into the cold night. A black SUV skidded to a stop in front of her. The door opened. Elias Mercer sat inside, smiling like a man who had finally trapped his prey. "Harper Quinn," he said smoothly. "We should talk." She didn't have time to run before two men flanked her and pushed her inside. The door slammed shut. Damien reached the doorway just in time to see the SUV peel away into the darkness. "Harper," he shouted, voice breaking. "No." Lena stepped beside him, pale. "Sir, you're bleeding." He looked down. A thin line of blood trickled down his arm from where the door had clipped him during the chase. He didn't care. All he saw was Harper being taken. All he felt was the crushing realization that everything he feared was already happening. And the single truth burning through him was this: he would burn the world down before he let anyone keep her from him. The black SUV carrying Harper disappeared into the tree line so fast that Damien could do nothing but sprint forward until the shrinking red taillights vanished completely. His lungs burned, his injured arm throbbed, his heart felt like it had been ripped out of his chest. Lena caught up to him breathless. "Sir, we need to get you back inside. You're losing blood." Damien did not take his eyes off the road. "Prep the surveillance drones. Bring every tracker online. I want that vehicle found." "We're working on it," she said carefully. But the signal scrambled the second it left the compound. Damien turned, eyes blazing. "He took her because I hesitated, because she tried to protect me, because I didn't tell her soon enough what she means to me." Surfined her. Inside the operations room, the atmosphere was a storm of code alerts and frantic voices. Analysts typed at blistering speed. Firewall maps and traffic logs scrolled across wall-sized screens. A digital map of the region pulsed with satellite pings. Damien stood in the center, like the axis of a collapsing universe. One hand braced on the edge of the table as blood dripped silently from his sleeve. "He won't hurt her," Lena said quietly, though she sounded far from convinced. "Elias wants leverage. He won't kill her. Leverage only works when the hostage stays scared." Damien murmured. "Harper is terrified, but she's also brave. Brave enough to run from me." brave enough to walk straight into his trap because she thought it would protect the people she loves. He inhaled shakily, eyes fixed on the flashing map. I'm not giving her up. Not for the company, not for the board, not for the world. He pressed his palm to the console. Trace her phone signal, even if it was smashed. Pull from nearby towers. I want everything. Harper had no sense of time inside the SUV. Only the dull roar of the engine, the cold grip of fear, and the smiling face of Elias Mercer sitting across from her like a man observing a specimen. You must be exhausted, he said smoothly, adjusting his cuffs as though they were on their way to a business brunch. Running from Damien, running from headlines, running from your own mistakes. Harper's jaw tightened. I'm here because you forced my brother into betraying me. Elias tilted his head. Betrayal is such a subjective word. I prefer motivation. You threatened him. I encouraged him, Elias corrected with a shrug. Your brother has a talent for choosing the losing side. But you and I, he leaned forward, we could choose the winning one. Harper glared. I will never help you. You already did, Elias said with a smile that made her stomach twist. You walked out of Damien Hale's safe house and into my hands. That alone has shattered his focus. You see, my dear Damien is brilliant. But he has one devastating flaw. Harper swallowed. Compassion attachment, Elias said softly. He will sacrifice entire companies for someone he cares about, which makes you invaluable. Harper forced herself not to flinch. He's not like you. No, Elias said, smile sharpening. He's weak. The vehicle stopped. Two men dragged her inside what looked like an abandoned office building. Dark walls, broken lights, exposed wiring. It wasn't a torture chamber. It was a temporary digital war zone screens set up along the walls, showing HaleCorp security patterns. You're going to help me access the defense prototype, Elias said calmly. And you're going to do it willingly. Never. You underestimate the power of fear, he murmured, and the power of what you're carrying. Harper instinctively wrapped her arms around her stomach. Elias's smile grew. Oh yes, that. She backed away. If you lay a finger on me, I won't touch you, he said, almost bored. But I will let the world tear Damien apart. Unless you do exactly what I say. Hours passed as Harper was kept in a dim side room with a single chair. No windows, no clock. Only the faint hum of electronics and the echo of her heartbeat. She replayed Damien's voice over and over. You are not a weakness. You are the reason I'm fighting. She pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, I'm not going to let him win. Back at the compound, the board of HaleCorp appeared on a video conference. Faces cold and pixelated across the screen. Mr. Udita, Hale the chairman said you have dragged this company into chaos. We request your immediate presence. I decline, Damien said, respectfully. You will be removed from your position if you do not attend. Remove me then. Gasps rippled across the line. Damien Lena whispered urgently. Don't burn everything. I will burn the entire corporation to the ground, Damien said, voice steady as steel if it means getting Harper back alive. A silence fell heavy enough to suffocate. This conversation is over. He ended the call. Lena exhaled. That was not wise. It was necessary. A loud beep cut through the room. One of the analysts shouted, We have a ping? Weak. But it's from Harper's last phone fragment. Damien straightened. Location Warehouse District. Old Courier Hub. Signal is fading. Prep transport, Damien ordered. I'm going, Lena blocked him. Sir, you're injured. You're exhausted. Let the team move. Damien said, voice cracking. Lena, he took her. He touched her. He threatened her. There is nothing on earth that will keep me from getting her back. Lena stepped aside. Then I'm coming too. The drive through the decaying industrial blocks was silent except for the sound of rain beginning to slam against the windshield. Damien stared ahead, eyes burning with something feral. She left because she thought she was protecting me, he whispered. She still doesn't understand. Understand what Lena asked. Damien clenched his jaw. That I was already hers before she ever walked away. Inside the warehouse, Harper had been dragged to an upper floor. Elias re-entered the room holding a tablet. Last chance, he said calmly. Either you access HaleCorp's prototype, or Damien goes to prison for treason. I leak the fabricated evidence in one push, and he never sees sunlight again. Harper's breath stilled. You can't do that. I already did, Elias said with a shrug. Scheduled release. 20 minutes. Damien didn't betray the government, Harper snapped. You did, and I'm not going to help you destroy him. Elias leaned closer. You would let your child grow up without a father. Harper looked him dead in the eyes. My child will not grow up with a terrorist as their father. Damien is 10 times the man you'll ever be. Elias blinked once, then slapped her so hard her head whipped sideways. Pain burst across her cheek. You've just made a very stupid mistake. Downstairs, Damien's SUV screeched to a stop. Armed guards moved in formation, but Damien jumped out before they could finish securing the perimeter. Damien Lena hissed, "Wait for backup." I've waited long enough. He stormed into the building, gun-drawn rainwater dripping off his hair and jaw, a man who looked like he had nothing left to lose. Harper, he shouted, voice echoing through the empty corridors. I'm here. Harper. She heard him. She tried to yell, but one of Elias's men covered her mouth. Elias cursed. Find him. Gunfire erupted below. Damien moved like a storm, tearing through Elias's men, with cold precision, every blow fueled by desperation and fury. He burst through the door at the top of the stairs, just as one of Elias's guards raised a weapon toward Harper. No, Damien roared, firing, before the man could touch her. The guard collapsed. Elias retreated, rage twisting his face. You can't win this, Damien. Watch me, Damien growled. Elias lunged, knife drawn, but Damien caught his wrist, slammed him against the wall, and pressed the gun to his temple. You threatened her pregnancy, Damien said, voice shaking with restrained violence. You used her for leverage. You terrorized her. She was your downfall, Elias hissed. She was your mistake. No, Damien whispered, eyes burning. She's my redemption. He struck Elias hard enough to drop him unconscious. Then Damien rushed to Harper, hands shaking as he cupped her face. Harper, he breathed, voice breaking, are you hurt? Did he touch you? Tears spilled down her cheeks. You came for me. He pulled her into his arms so tightly she felt his entire body tremble. I will always come for you, he whispered urgently. Always. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest. I thought you'd lose everything because of me. I almost did, he whispered, kissing her hair. But none of it matters compared to you. Damien, she whispered, voice trembling. I'm scared. He rested his forehead against hers. I'm here. You're safe. Later, after authorities arrested Elias and his men, after HaleCorp was cleared of wrongdoing, after Damien publicly exposed SkyShield's crimes in a press conference that became the most viewed broadcast of the year, the world shifted. HaleCorp didn't just survive, it thrived. Investors called Damien a visionary. The Pentagon offered him a seat on a task force, but none of it mattered compared to the moment he walked into the private exam room 2 months later and saw Harper lying on the table with a small bump visible beneath her shirt. She smiled at him, tears in her eyes, holding out a hand. "Come here," she whispered. Damien crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her as the doctor pressed the Doppler wand to her stomach. A rapid fluttering filled the speakers. A heartbeat, his child's heartbeat. Damien covered his mouth, eyes flooding. "That's our baby," Harper whispered. Damien leaned down, pressing a kiss to her stomach. "My miracle," he whispered. "My family." When their son was born on a quiet summer morning, Harper cried into Damien's shoulder as he held the tiny, squirming infant in his arms. Damien looked down at their child like he was holding the entire universe. "He's ours," Harper whispered. Damien kissed her softly. "We're ours." That night they stood on the penthouse balcony, their newborn sleeping, inside the Manhattan skyline glowing beneath them. Harper leaned against Damien's chest, his arms wrapped around her, his lips brushing her temple. No fear, no secrets, no danger closing in. Only the 3 of them. A family built not from power or fear or survival, but from the single thing Elias never understood: love. If you're still here listening to Harper and Damien's journey, then take a moment with me. Right now, breathe in. Let the last scene settle in your heart, because stories like theirs are not just about danger or scandal or billionaire glamour. They are about the moments that change us, the moments we fight for the ones we love, the moments we choose, hope even when the world tries to tear it away. And if this story touched you even a little, if you felt your heartbeat spike when Harper whispered her truth, or when Damien stormed through that warehouse, if you felt something warm spread through you when he pressed that first kiss to her stomach, or when he told her she was his redemption, then this is your sign to stay with us for the next chapter of this channel, the next journey, the next impossible love that finds its way home. Because here in this little corner of the internet, you are part of this family too. The Soul Stories family, the Emma's Stories family, where every day we gather to breathe in something tender, something fierce, something beautiful, something that reminds us that we all deserve to be chosen, we all deserve to be protected, and we all deserve a love we don't have to run from. So tell me in the comments right now, what part of Harper and Damien's story grabbed you the hardest? Was it the moment she realized she wasn't alone anymore? The moment the world came crashing down on her? The moment Damien whispered, "I'm here"? Or was it that tiny heartbeat in the exam room, the sound of a future beginning? Or maybe it was the warehouse rescue, that moment he screamed her name and fought like hell to get her back. And tell me too where you're listening from, because I love seeing how far this family reaches, from New York to California, from London to Manila, from Nairobi to Sydney, from tiny towns to big cities. Each one of you holding your own story, your own battles, your own reasons for pressing play today. And if this story reminded you that you deserve a love that protects you, a love that refuses to let the world swallow you whole, then tap that like button, tap that share button, tap that subscribe, so you don't miss the next story dropping tomorrow, because I promise you something special is coming. Something even more romantic, more emotional, more powerful than what you just heard. If you want more billionaire romance, more secret pregnancy, twists, more danger and devotion, more stories where 2 broken people build something unbreakable together, then join us, hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and stay close. And if you want to support this channel, drop a heart in the comments, drop 2. If you cried, drop 3. If you want a part 2 of Harper and Damien's life, maybe the first time their son calls Damien Daddy, or the night Damien proposes on that balcony where it all began, or maybe even a spin-off with Harper's brother and his redemption arc. Whatever you want, just say the word. This family listens. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing kindness and emotion and storytelling in a world that sometimes forgets how much we need it. Till tomorrow's story, stay safe, stay brave, and always, always believe that the right love will find you, even in the middle of chaos, even in the middle of danger, even in the middle of the city lights.